Hello and welcome back to another Digital Foundry E3 Direct. This one's a little different though because I'm joined by two different folks, but equally interesting, I would say. First of all, we have Audi Sorlie up there.
Hey, how's it going, John?
Pretty good, pretty good. And our special guest today is, of course, modern vintage gamer himself. Welcome back.
Thank you, gentlemen, for having me on. Am I replacing Rich? Is that what I am? My Rich's replacement for this?
You have become the new Rich.
Congratulations.
Okay. Congrats.
All right.
Signed his contract.
Very nice. Well, hopefully I'll do a good job and fill in his shoes.
I think it's nothing to worry about.
It's not too hard. It's not too hard to overcome, Rich. So
fantastic.
You'll do just fine.
So
Just don't fall asleep and you're already halfway there.
There you go, exactly. And that's kind of why you're here, because Rich might have fallen asleep during some of the stuff we're discussing today. Because it's not everything is here. It's not necessarily up his alley. That's okay.
Yep.
But we're going to be talking about a lot of the stuff that happened at the show that we didn't talk about during the Xbox presentation Direct. And that includes, obviously, Nintendo. That includes SquareEnix stuff. Not that there's that much. It includes some, the Ubisoft stuff. And most importantly, I think number
all
one
the
on the
Capcom
list,
stuff.
Yeah, all the Capcom stuff. And, of course, the Gearbox stuff. I mean, they showed so much there. And then
This will be a 3-hour special, as we need to get through all the Gearbox.
We'll talk about the limited run games announcements, perhaps the interesting ones. We'll
I don't
talk
like those
about.
Guys. I don't like anyone at the limited run.
All right, but what about the Intellivision Amico?
Oh, I love those guys.
We got to talk about that.
Yeah,
we're gonna talk about all that stuff today. The thing that I think surprised us the most yesterday, Metroid Dread.
Oh yeah.
Which this is a big one because they started by calling it Metroid 5. But they settled on Dread, which is sort of like a callback to the old DS game that kept sort of emerging back in the day. It's like, oh, there's a new 2D Metroid game coming for DS, Metroid Dread. And I think there was even some footage out there of
there's
this being
pictures
shown,
at least.
but it never came to pass, of course. And here we are now, developed by Mercury Steam, which did the Metroid 2 remake, Samus Returns, which was pretty good. And good. This one's for Switch, and it's 60 frames per second, unlike that last game. So what do you guys think of this then? Audi first.
I'm very happy to see Metroid back. I'm very glad to see that they're kind of continuing this style that's been set up with Super Metroid and the Metroid Fusion, and then continuing, of course, with the 5 title. Really happy to see that it's 60 frames per second, first of all. And I love the atmosphere so far we're seeing. We saw some interesting water physics happen in the Treehouse special that was after.
That was really cool.
It's not so much in the trailer, but we saw it a lot in the Treehouse special, where you can manipulate the water. So it seems to be some new physics-based puzzles being involved there, and also a lot more stealth elements. We saw that in Zero Mission, and then Fusion, there's a little bit of it. But they seem to have kind of included a bit more of that stealth element. And I think that fits in perfectly fine with Metroid.
Yeah, I was very impressed. There's been talk about a 2D Metroid for a while now. There was a lot of rumors around 2D Metroid. I mean, I've heard about a 2D Metroid in development for about a year now. But of course, rumors are rumors, and you never really know what's going to come out of that. Metroid Prime 4 was another game that, is in development, which they didn't show anything of that, right? But they kind of pivoted towards this 2D Metroid, which I thought looked excellent. For me, it was probably the best part of the Nintendo show that they showed off. I'm all about it. I love the art style. I love the 2D-ness of the game. And look, you can tell that they've put a lot of care and attention into this one. This is not just I don't want to say it's just a cash grab, because I don't think any Metroid was ever that, especially because, I mean, generally speaking, Metroids haven't really sold very well comparatively speaking to other Nintendo franchises. So there's a little more there, for people to think about. But I think the game's excellent, and I can't wait to play it. I already pre-ordered the limited edition thing that they've got going on, so
I'm trying to pre-order it.
I'm a big Metroid
We're both
fan.
trying here in Europe. It's being difficult.
Trickier.
Yeah, I bet. But no, it looks fantastic, and I can't wait. And I'm glad that it's coming out, in the not too distant future as well. That's not something that we have to wait a while for. So very, very happy to see Metroid get some love at the Direct at E3.
That was kind of the thing with the Nintendo Direct in general, was that
Yep.
everything is the near future, and it's giving
Yep.
consumers like a taste of what's to come now, whereas the other Directs were much more angled towards the future in 2022 then especially. So this makes the Nintendo's Direct quite exciting, right? Because it's like we're going to be playing this in mere weeks rather than
Yep.
maybe next year, maybe in 2 years, depending on how the pandemic has affected the industry. But I was just going to quickly say with Metroid, I was one of the few, I guess, that really enjoyed Other M. Maybe
me
not so
too.
much the story.
I love that game.
I think
But the
I think
gameplay-
we all love it here. It's a good
Okay.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I even have it here at my desk, the Japanese copy. But I really enjoyed Other M's gameplay. And I did see some nods to, for example, the melee combat, which I think there was a little bit on the DS version as well. But
It was, yeah.
yeah, I really enjoy that addition to Metroid that included melee, and I'm glad to see that they're actually bringing a little bit more of that back from Other M, and then of course the Samus Returns remake. And I think on the Treehouse thing, they did confirm that Sakamoto was very involved with this game as well.
It's cool. On my wish list though, I really hope they bring Anthony back from Other M. Like, you go to open one of the doors and like the door opens and he's standing there with that big smile. It's like, remember me again? Oh man.
So, how do you think they're going to handle kind of the suspense and horror aspect of this game? Because Metroids have done that very well, especially some of the 2D stuff. I think about Fusion. Obviously, that's a game.
Fusion is amazingly tense.
The amount of suspense in that game. This one has a similar vibe, at least from what I saw. Do you think they're going to do that in this one, or do you think they're going to take it way back? I guess.
I definitely feel like they're taking it back. I mean, you saw they have that huge stalker creature now that looks like it's out of Portal, which sort of like influenced the visual design a lot in general, I think. But there's clearly sequences where that thing is chasing you now and you have to essentially escape. They show right away in the trailer up close that the weapons are doing no damage. Missiles, a normal shot, nothing can hurt it. I assume that at some point you will be able to attack it, but clearly they're sort of factoring that in terms of, plus you add the stealth stuff on top of that, so it feels like they're sort of creating more of like a threat that's always present within the environment, which I think is a neat idea.
Yeah, that cat and mouse chase from Fusion seems to be coming back here, and I think that was actually my favorite part of Fusion, was like the evil Samus kind of showing up and using the visor and you having to hide. It was super tense moments, and I'm glad to see that Mercury Stream is back to work on Metroid, because I think they did a great job on 3DS.
The sound in the trailer and the demos was really, really nice, I think, as well. It's very promising for capturing the atmosphere. And just in general, I feel like their technology has improved a lot, because they had done some amazing work with the Castlevania games, but the frame rates were always poor. And then they did those 2 3DS titles, which looked good, but again, lower frame rate. But this time it looks like they've hit the required 60 FPS for smooth side-scrolling action. And I know people were saying, oh, I don't like this 2.5D kind of look, but I really think in this case it actually looks good. And I think I said in our stream, it kind of reminded me of Bionic Commando Rearmed in a way, like just the size and the way everything is kind of like skewed on the screen. It has a nice look to it, and the animation is very fluid. It looks like it'll be very responsive, so I'm feeling pretty positive about it.
Games Done Quick must have been so happy to see that a new Metroid is coming out, because this will probably headline every Games Done Quick for the next 2-3 years, and I will love every single run.
I gotta say, I appreciate that we have this new 2D Metroid, but then Metroid Prime 4 is still in development, because it kind of takes you back to the GameCube era again, where Fusion and Prime 1 were released side by side. And obviously, they will not be released side by side this time, but it's cool to have two distinct Metroid games in development. And obviously, when these come out, we'll talk a lot more about them then. But I think we should talk about some of the other stuff as well, because this isn't the Metroid cast, even though it almost could be. Starting with Zelda Breath of the Wild 2.
What do you think, Audie?
I love hang gliding, and I'm very happy to see that we'll take part in disguise. So I'm kind of interested to see what they're doing with the overall world, because it does look like we're still going to be in Hyrule, and the same Hyrule that we were in the first game. And it's interesting also to just do a sequel to a Zelda game like this, where I'm sure the title will change, but at the moment it is still Breath of the Wild 2, and it's using the same layout.
So it's funny, I think it just occurred to me that actually kind of recalls what they did with A Link Between Worlds, which kind of took place in the same world as A Link to the Past and Super NES, but obviously the world had been changed and modified based on what was happening in that story. And here there's a lot of floating islands and like structures way above the world that makes me wonder what kind of event occurred within this environment to cause that. But I am a little bit, I don't know, I hope I hope it's not just like more Breath of the Wild and they've actually found some new ideas and maybe implemented proper dungeons as well. And I don't know what it's going to be. It's still not clear from the trailer.
I think, a part of that is, this game seems like it's still very much in heavy development right now, that, even though they put 2022 at the end of that trailer, there's a good chance it could slip out of 2022, right? Because, Inuma-san even said, we're anticipating, we're hoping to get this game for next year. And that's not the same thing as, it's coming out next year, right? So I think one thing that was very apparent to me with the Breath of the Wild 2 stuff was, yes, the trailer did look great, but it also made me think, wow, this game still needs a little more to go before we'll get to play it. So I would expect that we don't hear anything from that game for probably a while, until maybe at the end of the year, maybe the Game Awards will see something more. But I'm thinking, it won't be till like next year until we hear about Breath of the Wild 2 again. I think this is really something that Nintendo kind of had to show the fans, because it's been a couple of years, is it 3 years now since they showed Breath of the Wild 2, the announcement at E3. So, I think they just had to give an update. It's been more than enough time.
I think you're exactly right about that. And I suspect this is where all the other Zelda related stuff comes into play. Breath of the Wild 2, they didn't show much, but they also discussed stuff like, they have the Skyward Sword remastered coming out soon, which they finally showed running at a nice smooth 60 frames per second, which actually looks really good in this case. I feel like it's very fitting with that sort of art style they have. So that was good. I'll be curious to see how it plays though, because they did show using the two Wii remotes, or not Wii remotes, I'm thinking of the original, the Joy-Con for motion control, but you have to assume it's also playable without that. Mm-hmm. And how they implement that,
right,
and how that actually ends up feeling is going to be really important to whether or not the game plays well.
It looks like they've gone into the game and changed quite a bit based on some enemy behaviors even I saw. I'm wondering if the AI has been changed even to accommodate for simpler attacks.
Yeah, and you have to remember that they have to focus, or they have to target this thing for the Switch Lite as well, which obviously doesn't have detachable Joy-Cons.
Doesn't have anything.
Yeah,
my concern was that they would try to simulate motion control using like analog stick motions. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, we'll just map this to the right stick and it'll work. And that would be terrible. So I don't think it's going to be like that. But
that'd be like that Obi-Wan game on Xbox, right?
Oh no. Yeah, with that second string Obi-Wan impersonator.
Masters, I felt something behind their attack. Something more complicated, sinister.
Then you must prepare yourself,
I kind of expected to see other Zelda conversions. Like they've brought everything else over from the Wii U at this point nearly. So why not bring over like say Wind Waker HD or Twilight Princess HD or something like that?
It's been heavily rumored that they will be like, and I'm sure I think with those rumors there's something, but I don't think they wanted to show that much Zelda stuff on this direct. It was already 40 minutes, but also I think like MVG was saying, it's like they can't even show that much of Breath of the Wild 2. So I think by overcompensating by showing all these other ports and attempts, like I don't know if that's the best idea. So spreading it out over this year and next with these remasters is fine.
Makes sense. Plus they have the they're doing another one of those Game & Watch things they announced. This time with Zelda 1 and 2 and the Game Boy one and a Game & Watch specific.
I have to ask MVG, I'm happy you're here. I don't know if you noticed, but I think you did, based on knowing you.
I know what you're going to say.
I was... Okay. When I was looking at it, I noticed that the Game Boy's resolution seems to be a little bit stretched.
The
I was just going to say this, yes.
Dude, that was the first thing that I noticed. I was like, this Game & Watch looks cool, and then they showed Link's Awakening. I'm like, wow, that's fun. You know, I'll play Link's Awakening again, and then I noticed it's a 4:3 aspect ratio. And I'm like, the Game Boy is not 4:3, and I mean, look, I've seen, you know, these cheap knockoff handhelds that will stretch the image. That's one thing, but Nintendo, come on. I mean, you know, make the game 10:9 like it's supposed to be.
What do you really know about how the Game Boy works, though?
I know what a good aspect ratio looks like, and that was the first thing. That I noticed, and I was like, man, that's such a shame that they did that. You know.
But that's actually a real problem for a product like this because they're using a low resolution LCD screen. There is no screen that's going to play nicely with both NES games and Game Boy games on the same screen while displaying them within the full screen. You know what I mean? The aspect ratio is fundamentally different. The actual pixel resolution is completely different. I mean, if you had a really high res screen, you could maybe get away with it and make it work and just kind of border the Game Boy stuff so that the aspect ratio is correct. But I actually think this could be a real problem, and that in the end, what they're going to do is just interpolate the pixels up to fill the screen for all games, and they're just going to be kind of blurry and incorrect in terms of aspect ratio. I mean, on the Game Boy side.
Yeah, look, I know we're nitpicking. I mean, this is a collectible. Most people are going to leave this on their shelf. They're not even going to take it out of the box, right? No one's going to play this thing. But I just found it funny that when they showed it yesterday, my heart just sank a little bit. I'm like, come on, fix the aspect ratio, Nintendo. What are you doing?
Or at least have a mode where you could press a button to select different options or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
When they showed off the Game & Watch Mario, that presentation was also awful because the capture they had done was all like shimmery and low quality as well. So it seems like you just cannot get the presentation surrounding these Game & Watch down proper.
Screen stuff is really interesting, but I did just see that somehow Funny Playing, that's been doing those IPS screens, they just recently announced that they're doing a new Game Boy Advance IPS screen that actually has the exact pixel resolution of original GBA screens, which we've not seen before. I mean, some of the other ones they've done with the retro grid, where it's just a high density, high PPI LCD, and then they sort of draw black lines to simulate the grid. But here they managed to source an IPS panel that's actually GBA res, which is really cool.
But they didn't show this off in the Direct, John.
No, they did not. I'm just talking about the screens on these portable machines and how Nintendo is maybe not getting it right, and noting that such solutions are possible. But they're probably not putting the money behind it to ensure that. I guess, though, the last Zelda thing that we don't really need to talk much about is they did like some Age of Calamity DLC, which, whatever. I've heard it's a decent game, but the performance is so poor that I'm not really sure I could ever truly get into it. And that's kind of like, that's screaming for a new Switch model, I feel.
Yes, I basically won't be playing it until there is a way to get the performance up. So it looked like cool DLC though, but
it did.
until I played, not much to say about it.
WarioWare. They showed a new WarioWare game, and it's been a while, hasn't it? I mean, there was WarioWare Gold on the 3DS, which was sort of like a remake, I suppose. But we haven't seen anything quite new in the series for a while, and I was kind of happy to see it return with nice hand-drawn artwork and everything like this and high res. What do you think about this MVG?
I'm very happy that it's returning as well. I don't think there's a bad WarioWare game in the mix, and I think the Switch needs it. You know, it's almost the perfect system for a WarioWare game in many ways. So I think the addition of the 2-player mode is interesting. I'd like to see how that actually performs in execution, but overall, this was a surprise announcement for me. There was some talk. You know, Nintendo took a survey recently about, does anyone want to see a WarioWare game come back? And I think a lot of people speculated.
I said yes.
That it may show at the Direct. But normally I don't tend to, focus on those types of rumors because, Nintendo does what Nintendo does, right? But very, very happy to see this get announced at the Direct. One of the surprise games for me, for sure.
Same for me. I mean, I love those games. Especially love things like Twisted. And I always feel like WarioWare is always such a great game to showcase hardware and controls. You know, with Twisted, you had the twist controls. Then the smooth moves, I thought was a pretty fun way to introduce the Wii. And Game and Wario, I think it's not a bad game, but it might be one of the weaker in the series. But it's still pretty fun. And it's been solely missing from the Switch though, so I'm happy. Especially the 2-player mode does intrigue me, and I do wonder if this game will end more friendships than Mario Party, because it seems like a game that just would be designed for this kind of like Chip and Dale's Mario Party style end the friendships.
Another one that I thought looked great yesterday was Advance Wars, which is coming back. Advance Wars 1 and 2, I guess. It's being remade for the Switch in 3D, and we've since learned that it's being done by WayForward, which is cool. But I've seen a surprising amount of backlash to it for some reason. A lot of people are lamenting the shift to 3D and saying, and as a 2D pixel art lover, I kind of get that, but at the same time, looking at what they've done here, I feel like they've really captured the look of what Advance Wars was going for originally, like the little tanks and vehicles. They have that shiny toy aesthetic, right? Single color, with the sort of the specular sheen on it, and they look like little models dropped into the scene, which I think it has its own cool look to it. What do you guys think?
Well, first of all, this was another surprise announcement for me. I had no idea about this game, and I was very happy, to see it get announced. I will say that initially on first looks, I wasn't that big on the graphical style, for the reasons why other people were saying maybe the 3D models needed a little bit more texturing or just something. They needed something else. But I have since come around. I've watched the trailer again a few times, because when you watch it during the show, you're either really hyped up about something or you're really disappointed about the previous game they showed or something. So I kind of just watched it in a vacuum, if you will, and I do get what they're going for, the aesthetic, and it's definitely growing on me now. And look, WayForward, I mean, they do great work. The game is in good hands, and I'm sure the underlying engine code is going to be one-to-one of the the game play that we know and love. So I'm all about it. I'm definitely on board with this for sure.
Another one to talk about then is this one. Shadow dropped. Cave shooters are coming, more of them, to the Switch. They announced Mushihime-sama would be available right away after the Direct, and it was. The thing that was surprising is they only showed it. So they actually showed it only during the Japanese Direct, but I later looked back in my email, and the PR had actually sent out an email just before the Direct happened, saying, or just after, saying, as you saw in the Direct, And then they sent a correction and said, actually, it only ended up showing in the Japanese Direct. So I get the feeling that there was at some point where it was intended to be shown for everyone, and then it got pulled for whatever reason, which is a shame, but it's cool to see these games coming to Switch, even if it's just in digital form for now. But and I bought it already, and I can confirm that it works really well with the flip grip, which is key.
Was it M2? Did M2 do it, or?
This one is not M2. It's not shot triggers, but I can't remember who did it off the top of my head, but it's a pretty good conversion. There's a lot of screen options. You can rotate the screen in 4 different directions. You can scale and stretch as you please. You can filter on and off. There's a lot of stuff you can do with it to customize it to sort of fit what you're trying to do. You can even choose to rotate the interface or not to match the in-game screen. So it's pretty packed with features, actually, and it runs very well. And it just feels it's really good with the flip grip. So I'm happy to see it.
Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Hopefully they'll get a physical out for that, because I love my physical cave games. I have the PS2 version of Mushihime-sama, so it'd be interesting to compare against that, because that's a pretty good one.
I have that as well in the big box with the little figure, right?
Yep, that's the one.
That one and Dodonpachi. Which one was it? It's Daiojo.
Yeah, Daiojo.
So
yeah.
that one is really good, but Mushihime-sama on PS2 has a problem where it's only interlaced without a flicker filter, even in Tate mode. So it has a very jaggy look to it. Whereas if you play it on, say, if you play Dodonpachi on PS2, you get proper 240p when you're in Tate mode, and when you're not in Tate mode, they have the option for various like flicker filter settings to help it look cleaner on a CRT. So that port was not great, but we're not talking about that now. We should save that for another thing, I think. Another one that I think is a big deal is, after all this time, it was announced that Project Zero / Fatal Frame 5 essentially is getting not only a Switch port, which was announced here, but it's being ported to everything, basically. Maiden and Blackwater, I guess it was.
Yep.
I played it on the Wii U. I like it a lot, and it felt like it was one of those games that might have been doomed to be stuck on the Wii U, but it seems that they have decided to port it. And yeah, what do you think, Aud?
I'm really happy to see Fatal Frame back. I'm very surprised to see it actually end up on the PlayStation platform, because there was always some confusion on ownership rights for the Fatal Frame series, and Nintendo had some at least funding, because the 4th game is stuck on Wii and probably will never be ported due to all those bugs. But very happy to see it back. It looks quite fantastic. The updates they've done to it. And seems, Fatal Frame worked with the controller before, so I don't think too much is lost without the Wiimote. Or not the Wiimote. What am I talking about? The what was the Wii U controller called? The Wii U screen controller?
The gamepad.
The gamepad.
They just called it the gamepad, I think.
The gamepad, okay. So with the gamepad, I don't think too much is lost, even though that was a pretty cool feature on the gamepad.
But we know it works. This series has worked on other consoles before, so no big deal.
Yeah, I think the game looks cool as well. The fact that it's coming out to pretty much everything doesn't necessarily mean I want to get the Switch version. Maybe I'd rather get maybe the PS5 version and play it on a big TV, at 4K. So get that Fatal Frame experience that we know and love. So, but I'm very happy to see this one. Again, another surprise announcement came from nowhere. And I think that was the theme of the Direct for me. There was a lot of really cool surprises that came out.
And I can only hope that they make a physical for the whole world this time, because Fatal Frame 5 was only Europe and Japan.
That's right. Yeah, yes, that's the thing. And the cost of that version has gone up quite a bit in recent years. So it's not exactly easy to obtain if you missed it initially. Next game I did not see coming to Switch. It's Cruis'n Blast from Raw Thrills, which I guess is Eugene Jarvis's arcade company. They're still making arcade games over there. including this Turtles game that Audie talked about. I haven't played that one yet, but you say it's
Yeah,
quite
they
good.
did this 4-player brawler from the 2012 cartoon, which is a very good cartoon. And the game isn't that bad, so even though this doesn't really mean anything, it's kind of interesting still to see Raw Thrills end up on console.
Have we seen that before? Has Raw Thrills published or produced a game on a console yet? Either way, it's interesting because, you know, Eugene was originally involved. Like, he was one of the main creators of Cruis'n USA in the first place back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not coming from just, you know, nobody. It's coming from, you know, at least one of the original developers. I'm not sure who all is at Raw Thrills these days, but it actually looks like a good time. It looks like a crazy arcade racer, very colorful visuals, heavy on the reflections.
I love it.
I love it.
Am I right in saying that all the cruising games are exclusive to Nintendo systems, or have they ever shown up on anything else?
They've never shown up on anything else, I don't think.
I thought so. And this is exclusive too, right? This is an exclusive Switch game, from what I remember. So it's, I'm all about it. Look, Cruis'n USA is it's kind of dumb arcade fun, but give it to me, you know. And all the games, I really enjoy them. So I was pretty happy with this one.
Do you think this game is also powered by the Ultra 64?
Hopefully they'll have an Easter egg in there where they show the logo.
Oh, I know.
That'd be cool.
That would be so great.
If only the Wii game was powered on the Ultra 64, it might have actually been good.
Right.
Ooh, that one. Yeah, I think that might win the award for the worst promo shot in history still. That thing, Super Monkey Ball. They're bringing them back. I guess it's 1 and 2, is it?
Yep.
They're sort of remastering them for new platforms, which is, I think, what people would have wanted in the first place. They did like Banana Blitz previously, if I recall, which was fine. But Super Monkey Ball 1 and 2, I think, are the best in the series, specifically 1. But I don't know what you guys think about this, but I do have some concerns about the controls. Because I feel like part of the appeal, or why it works so well, is that the GameCube analog stick was so expertly tuned and so precise for a game like Monkey Ball, from the stick itself and the way it actually moved to the 8-way gate around it, the octagonal shape where you could kind of like stick your, you know, place the stick in each one of those little corners there. I feel like all of that contributed a lot to making the game feel just right. And then you come over to the Switch. I mean, if you have a Pro controller, it's better, but I think a lot of people are using the Joy-Con, and notoriously that's a really not a great analog stick. So I'm really curious to see how well this will actually work.
What about gyro? Do you think that's not going to translate well enough to this game?
That's a tricky one. Like, it could be fun, but the precision required to really perform in Monkey Ball, I don't know.
You have to have new stages that take gyro into account then.
Maybe not. I mean, it's feasible. I just don't. I can't really say whether it would be pleasant yet.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting comparison, you know, with the GameCube game, because maybe they'll relax the, I guess, you know, the movement a little,
sensitivity.
To add some, you know, some percentage of error, you know, to the movement to make it more in your favor, possibly. So it would be interesting to see if they actually tweak the controls, you know, to suit.
Personally, I think the real solution here is to release a physical version with a wireless banana joystick, just like the arcade game.
That'd be cool.
Just the whole banana. There you go. I think that's it right there. Another thing I'd like to see more of is Shin Megami Tensei 5. The previous, so 3 obviously was just remastered and re-released recently. That was originally on PlayStation 2. Then they did 4 on the 3DS, which was rather interesting. And now they're back with another full-on sequel. And it looks pretty good, I think, aside from the giant UI. But otherwise, I mean, what do you think, Audie?
No, I definitely think the UI is a little bit, a bit of an eyesore, but it's hard for me to say much because Shin Megami Tensei is not necessarily my favorite game series. I've never been much into it, so I can tell that this looks cool for the fans. So I think it's a good get for Nintendo. I'm not sure, is this exclusive?
I think it is.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
pretty sure it is.
And you know, the fan base for this as much as the rest of Atlas stuff in the US is very passionate. So it's just a game that, like, when I see it in the direct, I feel happy for people, and I'm just a positive guy, I guess. So it's just like, oh, someone will be really happy about this, so I'm happy for them.
But you would have been happier if we got that Tokimeki Memorial game, like girls' side.
Yes, quite lonely sitting here. So I was hoping for that, but that will not happen, unfortunately.
No.
Well, one thing about SMT5 is I know it's finally coming out in November, and it's been a game that's been, I think they announced it. If I'm right, did they announce it like when the Switch got released? Like way back when?
That early? Wow.
Yeah, so this game has been in development for a long time, so I'm glad it's finally coming out, and the fans will get to enjoy it.
And by the way, it's using Unreal Engine 4, which is fascinating. Which is also funny because the remaster of 3 was done in Unity. So everything is being consolidated. It's there's tools, man, I'll tell you. Is there anything else you guys want to touch on from Nintendo though before we move on? I mean, there was stuff like Mario Party there, which is, that's its thing, and a few other random things here and there.
I think it's just overall, it was a very good showing. It definitely, the pandemic has hit Nintendo quite hard, and maybe harder than many other studios, just because the transition for them was quite severe. But it's clear, there is a lot of remasters here, and there will be for a little while. But it's still good to see that they can keep on trucking, and the quality of these games looks still spectacular, and they're coming out soon, which a lot of the other companies couldn't say.
And before we get to SquareEnix and all of that, I feel like it's time for the discussion about the all-important Intellivision Amico. It's time. Gentlemen, are you ready? There was a 15-minute presentation. We got to see the Amico in action. We got to see the controller. We got to see the games.
Got to see Tommy Tallarico.
I got to see Tommy Tallarico. First thoughts, Audi.
Oh, let me try to have one. It looks very much like the people who are working on it believe in it. And I think the idea that they have is sound. I think family entertainment is important. I think, the living room experience is something that definitely should live on as someone that has grown up playing with brothers, sisters, and families. At the same time, I question whether or not this market already does exist, already is pretty well represented in this form of mobile and even the consoles themselves, such as the Switch. And they keep saying they're not competition and whatnot, and I totally understand and agree. But at the same time, we're seeing games that are basically variations of what we can get on the consoles. So it's sort of like yes, but no. We're still getting platformers like Fox Forests and Dino Blasters.
We're getting the sequel to that.
Yeah, okay.
It's Finnegan Fox, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, very nice name.
So actually, I think that specific game highlights one of my biggest critiques with the games that they've shown is that, Fox and Forest was a pixel art game that evoked Super NES style visuals. Finnegan Fox or whatever sort of goes for that high res art that, I don't want to say Flash like, but it's kind of Flash like. And a lot of these games have this look where they just look like kind of relatively, I'm sure they are low budget, but they look like low budget mobile games in a way that's not, that I feel is not necessarily something that should be a limit of the hardware platform itself. It's just they've made some strange artistic decisions that make the games look somewhat unappealing, even if the concept itself is sound. And also the performance seems really poor at this point, which is not acceptable for a game like that. But I know they keep saying we're not competing with that audience, but I feel like they could do this better. Like the idea is interesting. They're saying, this isn't a platform designed with DLC in mind. It's not designed with patches and such in mind. It's just meant to be, you ship a product, it's done. It's more limited in scope. The prices start like $10 to $20 for the games. I see where they're going. It's just, who's going to want to work on this? And like, I especially since they're saying like, oh yeah, the games on here are either going to be exclusives or have exclusive content. Like, who are they to make those demands to these developers unless they have a lot of cash to throw around to make that possible? But we've seen this stuff before. I mean, not that it's necessarily comparable to something like Stadia, but Google threw a lot of money at people to bring stuff to Stadia. It didn't mean anything in the end. They really have to deliver something more to actually make it enticing.
Yeah, I think the we're not competing with anyone angle is interesting, because for me, they may not feel like they're not competing, but I think about a product like the Evercade Versus that was just announced, and I see that as a competitor, and it's cheaper, and that is a family, a local cooperative 2-player system where you and your friend, or you and your brother or sister can plug in and play games together. And for me, I think that Amico is competing with something like that, even though they may not really be thinking about something like the Evercade. But that's kind of where I see maybe the Amico stumbling is really the marketing research they've done. Maybe it does suggest that they are there are people out there that want a offline cooperative local co-op home system that plays family friendly games. But I think if they looked a little closer, there's probably other competing systems out there that do very similar things.
I think their price target too is a problem. They're aiming for like $299, which is awful steep.
I also think when you say, oh, we're not competing, and we're not going to tread on this over and over, but when you have a game in development like Earthworm Jim, which is a game in a series that would only really interest a more specifically hardcore audience who are on the console already, I don't think anyone below the age of 30 really is sitting there wanting a new Earthworm Jim. It would be people like us three. Yeah. I think all of us would say like a new Earthworm Jim, that's interesting. What's it for?
Yeah.
The Amico? All right. Not to mention that like the hardware, which we haven't even really spoken about, the hardware seems quite low powered. And then also just the idea of it, I do think that having these controllers with these screens and touchpads, it's an interesting idea. It makes kind of each game unique or bespoke, or whatever you want to say. But first of all, there's no precision with these touch controls, so then platformers and whatnot are out the window.
Well, it's not just you have touch controls and you have that wheel,
the
simulates
the
original wheel. Exactly, and like that doesn't make for a good D-pad like option or control stick style option.
So what's the option then? Do you do a classic controller thing where that can be attached, or do you use Bluetooth? And that brings up the point I wanted to make is this could have maybe been more like the Ouya, and maybe not too much like the Ouya, but it could have been very simply a square little box with some sort of front end and storefront where you had these exclusive experiences in games, and then your cell phone basically had an app that corresponds to this, and it would have basically been the same, and maybe the specs would have been even better, considering that smartphones probably will eclipse the power of any of those gamepads, or already are, I would assume.
I kind of feel like the gamepad thing though is kind of key to their appeal, just because we've seen so many of those Android boxes out there, and they were probably trying to find a way to differentiate themselves in that way. But I think you're probably right. Putting resources into that direction is not necessarily going to lead to the best products. So
I have to still say that I really respect them for trying something new.
Yeah,
and I really do respect them for they've been sticking out for this now for 5 years, 4 years.
It's been a while, yeah.
And both you and I know quite a few people involved in the project, so whatever it is, I do hope that they do find an audience and that there's some success to be had there, because fun for the family is not a bad thing, and if families are having fun on the Amico, then even better. So
yeah, I hope,
and they will have physical games, so
I like that.
I mean, Limited Run should get on that.
Plumbers don't wear ties for the Amico.
Yeah, the Amigo version. Well, actually, they announced that everything would have to be E-rated on the system.
So you get the censored version.
Yeah,
it's only like 5 minutes long, and then there you go. Limited Run Games shared more of their stuff. this isn't exactly tech or anything. I mean, this is just like, I think we're all kind of into collecting games and
Yeah.
appreciators of physical releases, and Limited Run is one of the best companies doing this stuff.
Well, we have a certain guest on the show today, John,
Who's actually-
who
Yes,
can talk about tech, because one of the first announcements made on the LRG stream was River City Girls Zero, which is a port of Shin Neketsu Koha Kunio Tachi no Banka. And for this new version, which is being made for Switch at the very least.
Yep.
PlayStation 4?
Originally.
Or just Switch?
Initially for Switch, and I believe PS4. I'm not sure if it's going to come out at the same time as Switch, but it's on the list for the kind of the first release of this.
So the original game on Super Famicom, and this interests me greatly because I think I've announced this publicly, or else this is the public announcement. I've been working on a book about the Kunio series for about 3-4 years, about the entire series, and interviewing the creator of it. And this Super Famicom game is one of the best Super Famicom games of all time, first of all, but also was one of the main inspirations for River City Girls, because the girlfriends were in it and pretty strong characters. And it has like the motorcycle segment, which would go on to influence Final Fantasy VII and things like this. So it's a really good beat 'em up, a really good like adventure story brawler. And then now that it's being ported, I'm very excited to see. And the man porting it is MPG.
Yeah, so this is the second game that will use the Carbon engine that we talked about previously. And it's currently in the works, and it's coming along quite nicely. So stay tuned. I'm sure fans of the game will really like what we've got to show. But it's been great working with those guys on this project. I'm really psyched about it. And Audie, I'm sure you're feeling good about it, and just rest assured, it's in good hands. So stay tuned.
I was, when you told me, I was super. The announcement was even sweeter because I know the actual port's going to be great. And I'm curious to see what you guys do with the game, because I guess you can't say much about it, but I'm wondering if there will be some extras or something involved here.
Yeah.
Or a cartridge release.
There's not really much I can say about the project right now, but I'm sure we'll do a retrospective when it's all said and done.
When the time comes.
And we'll answer all
Maybe
those
it's time for a
questions.
DF Retro on the Kunio series at some point.
Maybe. I mean, River City Girls 2 River City Girls 2 was announced as well, so that would actually make an interesting one.
That will require some work.
Oh, well, my book is almost finished. So
we'll just use your book as the script, and it'll be like an 8-hour video. Awesome.
Yes, pretty much.
All right, so that's obviously a really great announcement. The two River City Girls games.
It's a great series, and I mean, Meg McDuffie coming back for doing the music. I think she's doing a new music video for Zero as well. And the first game I thought was, it was the kind of rejuvenation that Kunio couldn't needed, because there has been many 3DS games and PC games in the series, and they've all kind of treaded back to the old downtown Neketsu Monogatari style. And then this also uses that, but also it's very pro wrestling / anime / just way forward. So it was exactly what Kunio needed, and I think moving forward, it's going to be a pretty successful series.
There was a lot of other stuff shown as well during their presentation. I think one of the ones that kind of excited me just conceptually, even though I already have the game, they announced an official English TurboGrafx CD version of Dracula X Rondo of Blood. So it's being fully localized. They have, because Konami also owns all the NEC PC Engine TurboGrafx stuff, they actually have the okay to use all of the original branding. So this is going to be, I guess, technically like the last official Turbo CD game release now. For now, that's cool. Like that, that idea. I'm so happy that this is actually happening and possible, because, it really is. It does live up to the hype. It's a fantastic game, and having an actual, official CD version of this, with the full translation localization in it is really appealing. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I will definitely pick this up.
I will for sure too. I mean, I don't have the original because I refuse to spend the money on it. So being able to get my hands on this, it's a dream come true. I love when Limited Run drops a release for like the Sega CD because they've done some of those releases in the past. So releasing these games for like these obscure systems that the fans will love. But the average consumer will be like, "What the hell's the Turbo CD? I don't even know what that is." But I'm all about it, man. I'm definitely gonna pick it up. I can't wait.
It's also such great timing with the Analog Duo coming out eventually, so that it's a perfect pickup for that. It's one of the best games on the entire system, so that's one thing. And when Limited Run started doing these reprints, including Shantae, which we talked about with you because you did it. I think this is such a cool business. It's like a dream come true to make these games available again, properly made. And I never expected Rondo Blood to be re-released and translated like this, but now it's happening. And it makes me excited as well for the future because it's clear that Limited Run and Konami, are having a good time right now because they also did Requiem, which Symphony of the Night and Rondo Blood on PS4, and 2 more.
They did the Contra collection.
Yep.
Wasn't there as well?
Well, I would hope that more classic Konami and obscure Konami could come out.
So I was thinking about this, and I feel like one of the obvious ones is like, oh, they could do the PC Engine version of Snatcher, because there was already a localization for that anyway. Maybe they could reuse it. But more interestingly, I think it would be bold of them to go back and take the original Tokimeki Memorial for PC Engine, which is where it first launched, and properly localize it and release that version on the Turbo CD.
It's the second time this direct that you bring this up, John. It's not going to happen. We're not going to get Tokimeki.
Yeah,
and
but
you just need to accept this.
You say that, but like
I've been here for 30 years waiting. It's not going to happen.
That just seems like something Limited Run Games might be crazy enough to try. Like they're one of the only ones I could see. They seem willing to splash out money on weird things, which most companies would not.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. It's probably not going to happen because the localization work is significant, to say the least.
I mean, the challenge is now out there.
The gauntlet has been thrown down. It's up to MVG.
Yeah,
we believe in you.
He'll do it by himself.
I'll tap the owners after this and ask and see if they're interested. They'll probably just tell me a 4-letter word that I can't repeat on the show.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Considering what they did announce, wouldn't be too far-fetched.
Well, that's a good point, actually, isn't it?
You were talking about Kunio, but they actually, I think they already, the Kunio-kun collection for Switch was already released in Japan, and I think you got a copy of that?
So I have Kunio-kun The World, which was the very first collection they did, which was, it's pretty good. Yeah, it's not bad. And then
they did like a digital.
it.
They did a digital version, right, of like Double Dragon and Kunio-kun for the West. I think?
For the West, and that's updated slightly too.
Ah, okay. And then that's getting a release now.
That's getting a release, yes. So that's great. I mean, the more Kunio, the better. And
I
Double
agree.
Dragon's also, of course, part of that.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
Very happy about that.
I was happy to see Dusk, which has been teased for Switch and also PS4, finally getting not only a console release, but also a physical release. It's sort of the throwback shooter published by New Blood. It was on one of my Game of the Year lists. I can't remember which year, but it's a really, really solid, super fast-paced game that's super old school in the best way. Obviously, there was the Plumbers Don't Wear Ties thing that came at the end, which is...
That's not obvious.
Well,
it's the opposite.
It's only obvious now in retrospect. It's like, if anybody watched that, it's like, oh yeah, that's the one thing. But in terms of actually happening, you're right. That is one of the least obvious and most bizarre things to occur. And I feel like you had some kind of hand in this as well, didn't you, Audi?
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at this.
Yes, I did. I don't know how much Josh wants me to go into the details of that, but it wasn't a huge deal. credit goes to Josh for years of finding whoever held these rights. You wouldn't believe how hard it was, but he was an advantage with me because I knew some of the people involved in the game, and we managed to work out something where they could do this game and the announcement, and very happy about it because I've known about this now for a few years. I've known that it was kind of like something they wanted to do, and it was like, all right, whenever you're ready, call me up, and got the call.
Another one, Strife Veteran Edition, which from Night Dive. I think you were involved with Edward on that, right?
I did.
MVG?
I did the Switch port. I didn't do the entire thing, but I ported the renderer over and most of the game. So myself and Edward pretty much tackled that together. So that's a good physical. Check that out if you haven't, because I think, in fact, Strife, I mean, the last time Strife was physical was the original big box PC version.
PC version, yeah.
So for fans of
which
that
was
game,
widely
check it
ignored
out.
at the time, but it's actually a great game. It's a first-person shooter with a lot of RPG elements and conversations made in the Doom engine, which was kind of insane for the time.
Multiple endings and all sorts of mechanics that were really well before their time.
It was
great game, very underrated.
Yep, super underrated. Overshadowed by stuff like Quake, I think. Which, to be fair, I get it, but still,
I think Strife came out. I could be wrong. Someone will fact check me, but I think it came out between Duke Nukem and Quake, so it never stood a chance, of ever really.
Yeah, I think you're right. It was like halfway through '96, like April or May or something. So you're right. It would have been kind of in between those two.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting one. Anything else? I mean, I asked about this because I hadn't played it, but I saw they're putting out Retromania Wrestling, and thankfully we have a wrestling game guru here. And you say it's okay. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so Retromania Wrestling, it's a game that's based on the WrestleFest engine. It's not the engine. They remade everything from scratch.
Right.
To the point where they actually did get the approval from Technos of Japan, or Arc System, to kind of use the connection in marketing. So it is a sanctioned sequel to that. I think it's pretty good. I have some issues generally with the hit detection and some small things like this.
Sure.
But the idea of a 2D wrestling game that harkens back to WrestleFest is really awesome. And I'm really happy to see that Limited Run is doing a physical for it, because it's very much an indie developed title. It is a very small team, and they've been working for years on this.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe I need to give it a look then. I am curious about it. And there's a bunch of other. We don't need to talk about every announcement. There's a bunch of stuff out there if you want. Those are just some of the ones that caught our fancy. But one that you brought up, Audie, as well, that's not actually limited run games. It's a different release, and it's Demon Throttle.
Yeah.
What's up with Demon Throttle?
Yeah, so this is being published via, I think it's Digital Devolver's kind of limited pressing special reserve. And it did kind of cause some controversy at the beginning of E3 because they announced it being physical only, meaning that there won't be any digital option for this game, which I think is one of the very few examples of this on the Switch.
That happened right alongside what is it? The Super Rare announced something similar, and both of these kind of got hit with a backlash.
Yeah, and I'm not sure about you guys. I just think generally limiting the availability to this extent. I mean, I'm sure there's things that can be said about doing limiting pressing in general. The idea of like having what people feel is artificial scarcity, but as someone that has been publishing indie games for 10 years now, it's like there is a pretty limited segment that are willing to buy these games anyway, and this is the only way you can even do. It's either this or you print up 15,000 copies and keep 14,000 of them in the warehouse. So there's a lot to be said about this topic in general, but for this, the option of not even having digital, I think, for a game that looks actually kind of cool, it looks pretty good.
It does,
It's,
yeah.
you know, I really don't get it, and I think personally, I just think it's a bit of a mistake.
I will say, to their credit, though, as you pointed out earlier, it seems to be an open pre-order, and an open pre-order that will be active for a long time. So
Yeah, I just, even with the open pre-order, I just think like it's a tactic to make people feel kind of like stressed and compelled to buy it as soon as possible. And
It's the FOMO effect, right? If you're missing out.
yeah, the FOMO effect. And I just personally, I collect physical games, and it just kind of makes me feel like not picking it up strangely, because of this. Because I know people that love these kinds of games, for example, their Switch, but they don't buy physical, and I totally understand them why they don't, because it's a portable system and they like having all their games on an SD card, and they're not like us, and I'm like totally fine. That's why we have the option of physical or digital. When you remove the most convenient and approachable way of buying a game, then I think kind of you've gone a little bit too far with this idea.
Yep. I agree. Let's talk about the Gearbox showcase.
Go on.
All right, what do you want to talk about? Where do we want to start?
All done. Next, we'll talk about Capcom.
Well, do you like esports?
Yeah. Did you like Resident Evil Village? It was pretty good.
I really enjoyed
liked that
it.
game.
I love the game.
Glad it's getting DLC.
Oh yeah.
I do.
That's announced.
Just on that real quick. I mean, if you recall when E3 was announced, there were a couple of companies that initially didn't throw their names in the ring, and I think Capcom, SquareEnix, and maybe Bandai Namco were the companies that didn't initially commit to E3, and they, I guess, at some point they kind of put their names in the ring, and you wonder, if you're going to do that, I mean, at least have something.
It was
like,
FOMO of it, dude.
Well,
Fear of missing out.
I guess.
Didn't want to miss out on E3.
Wouldn't these publishers be paying some, monetary amount to the ESA to get a slot? So if you don't really have much, I mean, what's kind of the goal here? That's the part that I couldn't really understand.
Next time E3 is actually physical, like we can go to the event again, I say that limited run, they have a press conference, but you have to be physically there, or else you will not know any of the announcements.
It's a good idea.
So take it back to the old days.
Except you need those clicks on.
Well, you cannot find any information online. It is only physical.
Forever physical.
Yeah, I mean, I like the plan, but I also feel like the execution of it would just crash and burn pretty quickly.
Maybe. But they could announce a port of Crash and Burn at E3 2022.
Now we're talking.
A port of Crash and Burn? Wow, I'd be into that.
Yeah.
They should just do the whole Crystal Dynamics back catalog. Bring back Gex.
That'll work.
Crash and Burn. All that stuff.
Yeah, well, this segment has been how to destroy a company in 2 minutes.
But more entertaining than Capcom's presentation.
Someone who did announce some stuff is we actually streamed this Audi with My Life in Gaming. It's the SquareEnix conference, which was ultimately not very good, but they did announce a few interesting things, and some not so interesting things, I guess. Where do we start? I mean, there was a lot of Marvel in this. They showed Guardians of the Galaxy at last, which
at last.
I don't know what to say. I mean, I'm a little... You can tell that a lot of work went into it, but I'm really sad that the studio that helped revive Deus Ex and did a darn fine job with it is now stuck doing this. It feels like such a weird left turn, and, I hope they find success with it, but it really didn't appeal to me.
No, same. I kind of... That was the time of the show where I went, to get a drink and grab a snack and take my time.
And you still came back to the gameplay.
Yeah, I came back and there was still 15 minutes of it.
like I applaud them for showing the demo. I think it's good to show gameplay demos like that, but they dedicated over like 20 minutes to just that game, and it felt a little bit long when what they were showing wasn't that exciting to begin with.
Yeah.
So, and then they followed that up.
They bounced back, John.
Oh, It's one of my favorite moments of a live stream that we've done yet. They announced the Final Fantasy 1 through 6 sort of collection.
The Pixel Remaster.
Pixel
Remaster. And then at the end, they dropped Steam/mobile, which sent Mark Triforce Duddison into a round of boo for about 5 minutes.
Steam/mobile, what?
No, not Stream.
Boo! Boo!
Why would they do that?
No!
Boo!
Steam/mobile. That's like the worst thing that could.
That's like the worst thing to put at the end of any trailer. Boo!
To catch
He was
that
not
string.
happy.
He was not a happy camper. Yeah.
And they
What do
didn't, you know, for something where he's called a Pixel Remaster, you would think that they would put like the actual graphics on display, you know, make it very clear what this is. And what we got was like a very tiny slideshow of logos and small screens, so no one could really point out like, well, what's the improvements here? Because there has been mobile ports of Final Fantasy 1 through 6 and further, and then Chrono Trigger and whatnot, and none of them have been especially good. They've had like all these blurry, I guess I borrow your term, of flash-like graphics, and been pretty derided, fixed by fans and mods, but still not the best port. And then here you have Pixel Remasters, so you would think that it's kind of like the PSP games, if you remember, like where, you know, Final Fantasy 1 looks pretty great.
It was great, yeah.
But I've actually looked at, people have kind of picked out some of the screenshots and found some graphics overall, and I'm actually somewhat interested in what they're doing. So it is still sprites, it is still pixels, but because we're now viewing them in HD on, you know, flat screens, the graphics are done differently. They're more simplistic, but they kind of highlight the characteristics differently than what, you know, on a CRT you would have all the bleeds and whatnot to, you know, shape the sprites differently. And now they cleaned up the sprite art to kind of still convey the same thing. So it's an interesting way of remastering them in pixel form for HD. So it's not necessarily a terrible idea. It's just a terrible way to announce and terrible platforms to put it on.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with also having it on like mobile, for instance, but it does make you wonder about the target and what they're trying to do with this. And I don't know. I feel like we're gonna have to wait and see on this, but I'm not super excited, to be honest. We'll see. And then they followed that up with more Marvel. I think it was more stuff about the Avengers, yeah. You know, which you know, that's a beautiful game, but I'm not super into it.
I can tell.
Yeah. I guess there was two.
There was Black Panther as well.
Oh yeah, Black Panther's in there. That's cool. I guess though there were two like one of these had already been announced, the other kind of been teased or like kind of rumored for a while. Is first of all Platinum Games Babylon's Fall. We finally got sort of an extended look at that, and it's an oddball one. I mean, what do you guys think about this? Because it's a unique style they're going for.
I'm rare. I think my reaction now is the reaction I had at the time. I don't know what the hell Platinum's doing right now with this game. Like, there were so many things that I just felt like, you know, this game showed so much promise initially, and, you know, the concept around it sounded really intriguing, but, you know, it's a live service game, which really just made me just feel like I'm not really going to play this game ever. And it didn't connect with me as far as the graphical style. I just felt like this is not Platinum's best work by any stretch. And, you know, Audie, you mentioned COVID being really a huge factor in Japan. I think the absence of Bayonetta 3 at the Switch event, at the Nintendo event, really kind of illustrated to me that the Platinum's had a pretty rough time, you know, probably this year, maybe last year as well. So, look.
It goes back further even.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't doubt it,
Yeah, the company has had some internal stuff going on where it's not that they're in trouble or anything. It's just that creatively, they're struggling a bit at the moment, and they've had some deals that haven't gone through.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
you know, has really affected the company and the trajectory, because Bayonetta not being there after all this time, not even a mention, makes me think that there must be more to that story, and whether or not, I don't know if it's outright canceled. Nintendo don't seem to really want to say anything about it, but I don't think we're gonna see Bayonetta 3 anytime soon.
Yeah. But yeah, that was kind of my takeaway from Babylon. So I want to hear what you guys thought, though. I'm curious.
Oh, it sucks. Just, there's nothing more to say about it.
I'm sitting here trying I'm trying to be, polite as I can about a game that I felt very disappointed about.
Yeah, live service, and I love creative art styles, and I'm from the school of Another World, like minimalism and whatnot. It's wonderful, and this aquarelle type water, paint.
Yeah.
It really doesn't translate the way they have hoped, and especially when you look in both in motion and in stills, it just it doesn't look good. It doesn't communicate any artistic vision that I think they hoped for, and it just makes me feel like the whole game shifted towards something that they don't feel much passion for. To me, it just seems like it's a contract being fulfilled.
Yeah,
it's a shame.
I think about, as a developer, right? If a publisher came up to me, we were working on a game, for example, and they said, "Look, this has to be a live service game," I think my interest level immediately would just drop, significantly, and I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I'm not saying that the developers aren't giving 100%. I'm sure they are, but it's very difficult to work on something maybe that you don't love, or you don't have the passion and desire to do. So I do wish, Platinum, well, hopefully they'll come around and show some really cool stuff. I still am hopeful that we will see some good stuff from them, but Babylon's fall was a disappointment for me. No two ways about it. It wasn't great.
And this is kind of their second big contract project, I guess, with SquareEnix after Nier Automata, right? So, and that obviously went well for SquareEnix. Good for Platinum as well, but I'm sure Square benefited the most from that relationship. And it's kind of puzzling that this is what they moved on to, I guess. And I'd be curious to know how much of an influence Square had on the decisions behind this. I would assume that it was Square that requested it to be a live service game. Probably. You would think so, right? That's not really in Platinum's wheelhouse. So I don't know. It's a weird one for sure. But so we'll keep an eye on that, but not looking great thus far. And then the other thing, which we shouldn't go into too much detail because we did a little separate thing on it. There was Strangers of Paradise Final Fantasy Origins, which is another game where they've partnered with a different developer, in this case Team Ninja. I guess they're still Koei Tecmo, I guess, technically, right? So but they do a lot of work for hire these days, it seems, and they had a lot of success with Neo recently, Neo 1 and 2 on PS4, and obviously this game looks like it's a continuation of that, but with a lot more Square influence in the Final Fantasy Origin stuff. Audie and I have talked about this in another video, so we don't need to go into this as well. But what do you think about this MVG?
I don't know. I mean, it didn't really grab me, at all, to be honest with you guys. I mean, I can see what they're going for, but I couldn't connect with this game at all, and it's something that I probably won't ever take a look at. So I may be the wrong person to give a deep perspective on this game, because I wasn't really feeling it. I am curious. I didn't catch your thoughts, but what did you guys think? Real quick.
It has a lot of technical problems, but the combat system is very promising. You can feel the DNA of Team Ninja in there. Some of the additions with the magic system are interesting. It's more like there's a lot of promising ideas, but it still feels rather underbaked, and it definitely feels like there's a lot more development to be done before it becomes something that's actually great. But the potential is there because the core mechanics are actually good.
For me, I'm not a huge fan of the loot system in the game. And on top of that, it feels very much like a design and a game idea that is about 10 years old. It feels like a Square Enix game that would have been announced and released like 2012, 2013. So, yeah, there's potential, but I really don't know if I'll ever feel greatly invested in this.
Fair enough. We're about at the end here. I mean, do you guys want to talk about any of the Ubisoft stuff, or should we wrap it up?
Well, yeah, I mean, Mario Rabbids obviously was the highlight. Great announcement. It looks good. You know, the trailer really showed off the game. Man, I can't wait to play it. You know, I was a big fan of the first one. It kind of came out of nowhere.
The first one was excellent.
Yeah, it was excellent.
It's really, really good.
That XCOM style gameplay that I'm a big fan of XCOM anyway, so I connected with Mario Rabbids pretty quickly. Look, bring it on. Bring on 2022. I can't wait to play this game. I think it was one of the highlights of E3 for me, quite honestly.
I think it's funny though, as soon as a third-party developer gets like the chance to do a Mario game, he's either in a hotel or he has a gun. So it's just kind of like it works, but it's still weird for me to see Mario with kind of handgun style weapons.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
but
if you're working with the Mario IP, you got to think like, well, what would Nintendo not do? Because I can't compete with Nintendo.
Yeah,
that is true. So you
so
make
he's
him
either
play
gonna
3-on-3 basketball.
3-on-3 basketball. He's gonna teach you how to type. He's gonna, run around in a hotel or do this. Like
there was
dudes.
a planned wrestling game / like volleyball game.
Oh man,
with Mario
wrestling.
That was actually in development at some point from Next Level, and was canceled. But,
that's a shame. That could have been interesting.
My biggest hope for Mario Rabbids is that Grant Kirkhope comes back to do the music.
Confirmed.
Oh, is it confirmed?
Yeah, confirmed.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, he was talking about it on Twitter the other day. He's back doing the music for it. So
he did an amazing job, and I really enjoy Grant's work. So that's great announcement.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then, there was other stuff. Avatar, I don't know what to think of the game yet, but technically it was very, very impressive. Far Cry 6 was like Far Cry. I'm sure it'll be fine. The other stuff, the Rainbow Six thing, don't really care. Yeah, I mean, there's other stuff out there, but I kind of feel like we've talked enough about a lot of stuff thus far.
Let's give a shout out though to Metal Slug Tactics.
Yes.
That looks pretty cool. Bit of a shame with the situation with SNK at the moment, but that's for another video.
Yeah.
But really happy to see Metal Slug back in a new but very interesting genre.
I'd say that's worthy of just highlighting .emu stuff in general lately. They've been kind of really hitting
work
out of the park.
Absolutely.
Streets of Rage 4 and
I also wanted to, I had it on here, but we didn't have too much time to go into it, but I should shout out to Gloomwood, which there's some demo stuff out there, and that's looking really awesome. As a big fan of the late 90s Thief games. Feels like it's right up my alley, complete with that aesthetic. That's something I'm keeping an eye on for sure. And, there's plenty of other stuff as well.
So before we leave, though, I'm just curious, MVG, what's your thoughts now on E3 as we move forward? Because obviously next year will be different, I think. But I'm curious, where do you think E3 is going to go from here?
Well, I mean, I think you're right, Audie. It's going to go back to, a fully physical event next year at the convention center. And look, this year was a rebuilding process for them. Obviously last year they didn't even have one. This year they mounted what they could. I will tell you, I'm not a big fan of the ESA as far as their management, but I mean, I think the event itself is important, and it needs to continue. So I think they did the best that they could given the situation, and overall it was fine. It certainly wasn't the best E3 or anything close to it. But as far as where it goes from here, look, honestly, I just think it goes back to the way it was. Next year I think they'll schedule it like they usually do, and kind of try to forget about the last 2 years, and whether that actually works for them, as far as publishers jump back on board and want to spend the dollars to set up presses and keynotes and stuff. Does remain to be seen. I think they probably will. Video games will always be a huge part of many people's lives. So I kind of expect it just to continue on, bigger and better next year.
Yeah, my opinion too is that like as soon as the possibilities there, they would want to go back to normal and really, fire on all cylinders on that. So I expect a pretty big E3 next year. But I don't think anyone on this panel is necessarily a huge fan of the ESA.
No,
so,
certainly not.
I mean,
but I hope it comes back though, because it is a lot of fun.
I miss the people, the friendships, the networking. I mean, I'll get to see you guys next year if it happens, and even that alone is the reason why I want to go. So I'm excited for it.
It's everything around the event for it's for us in the industry. It's very much a way to kind of enjoy ourselves a little bit and kind of reflect, so it's not just about the video games, it's not just about the press, it's also about the people who are there and getting to see each other, hug, and appreciate the industry as it is, and then the good sides of it.
For sure.
Exactly, especially for those of us that work from home. It's a good chance to get out. But that's going to do it for this one. So if you made it all the way to the end, well done. You earn an achievement. It's a virtual achievement, so you don't actually get anything for it, but nonetheless, you can say that you made it.
Post Shocky the Wolf in the comments to let us know you watched all the way here.
That's it. Post Shocky the Wolf in the comments if you made it this far, and we will appreciate that very much. But first, I want to thank MVG for joining us on such short notice. You made a good Richard Ledbetter replacement.
Well, thank you. I, again, big shoes to fill, and hopefully I did a good job.
Absolutely.
It was perfect. And then, of course, Audi, who's always here to help us, which is great. We appreciate it. It wouldn't be an E3 video without you. So
that's true.
Not
2 years
anymore.
now.
That's right. And hopefully next year as well. We'll see.
Yep.
And maybe we'll have MVG live on one of the shows then.
Oh, that'd be fun. Let's do it.
We'll see what happens.
Let's do it.
But yeah, if you guys enjoyed this, you know the drill by now. Like, subscribe, that helps the channel. Ring the notification bell for instant updates. Find us on Twitter. Actually, where can they find you on Twitter, MVG?
You can find me on Twitter at modernvintageg. So I'm pretty active. I usually tweet multiple times a day. So just hit me up there.
Perfect. And yeah, we will see you next time.